Most men train harder when someone is watching. They stand taller, they push faster, they perform better. But that is not where longevity is built. Longevity is built in empty rooms, in quiet mornings, in routines no one applauds. The men who last don't need an audience. They don't need encouragement. They don't need proof that it counts. They understand something simple and uncomfortable. If you only show up when it's visible, you won't last when it gets heavy. Quiet training is not about intensity. It is about loyalty to a routine, to a standard, to a promise you made to yourself. It looks boring. It feels repetitive. And that is exactly why it works. Because life does not collapse in dramatic moments. It erodes slowly. And only men who train quietly are still standing when motivation is gone, when praise disappears, when no one is watching anymore. Quiet training reveals something deeper than strength. It reveals reliability. Anyone can show effort when eyes are on them. Very few can be trusted when no one is checking. A man who trains quietly proves one thing first. He does not need pressure to stay consistent. He doesn't wait for reminders. He doesn't need accountability partners to survive. He doesn't collapse when structure disappears. This kind of man becomes dependable, not because he promises more, but because he disappears less. Quiet training builds a private contract between who you say you are and who you are when it's inconvenient. Over time, that contract shows up everywhere. At work, where deadlines are met without drama. At home, where presence is steady, not reactive. In health, where habits don't depend on mood. People may never notice your training, but they will feel its results. They will feel it in your calm, in your patience, in your ability to carry weight without making noise. Trust is not earned through explanation. It is earned through repetition, and repetition only survives when it is practiced quietly. Quiet training also changes how a man relates to time. He stops chasing quick results. He stops negotiating with discomfort. He stops asking how fast something will work. Instead, he asks one question: can I do this again tomorrow? Men who train for attention burn fast. Men who train quietly pace themselves. They protect their joints. They respect recovery. They understand that longevity is not about pushing harder, but about staying available. This mindset slowly rewires discipline. Training becomes maintenance, not punishment. Movement becomes responsibility, not motivation. Consistency becomes normal, not heroic. Over years, this is what keeps a man functional when others are forced to stop. Quiet training doesn't make headlines, but it keeps marriages intact, careers stable, and bodies capable. It is the difference between looking strong at 40 and still being useful at 60. Applause changes behavior. When a man trains for approval, his effort becomes unstable. It rises with attention and collapses without it. Praise teaches the body to perform, not to endure. The problem is not recognition itself. The problem is dependency. Once applause becomes fuel, silence feels like failure. Progress feels invisible, and invisible work is the first thing most men abandon. This is why many strong men don't last. They build peaks, not foundations. They chase intensity, not continuity. They confuse effort with sustainability. Quiet training removes this trap. When no one is watching, effort becomes honest. You stop exaggerating. You stop rushing. You stop pushing past signals your body sends clearly. Instead, you listen. You learn when to slow down, when to rest, when to repeat instead of increase. See, endurance grows not from heroic sessions, but from thousands of unremarkable ones. Applause rewards what is loud. Longevity rewards what is repeatable. And repeatable habits only survive when silence stops feeling empty. Quiet discipline is not dramatic. It doesn't announce progress. It doesn't chase transformation. It builds capacity. The men who last understand something critical. Life is not a sprint of strength. It is a long negotiation with energy. Every decade takes something from a man. Joints stiffen, recovery slows, margins get thinner, so discipline must mature. Quiet discipline adjusts instead of rebels. It removes ego from effort. It trades short-term intensity for long-term availability. This kind of man no longer trains to feel powerful. He trains to remain capable. Capable of waking up without pain. Capable of working without exhaustion. Capable of carrying responsibility without resentment. He stops asking how hard he can push. He starts asking how long he can stay useful. This shift changes everything. And workouts become sustainable. Schedules become realistic. Rest becomes strategic, not lazy. Quiet discipline also builds emotional endurance. A man who trains quietly learns to tolerate boredom, to sit with repetition, to respect progress that doesn't excite. That skill transfers. He reacts less. He listens more. He stays steady when others fluctuate. Over years, this steadiness compounds, not into spectacle, but into presence, not into admiration, but into trust. This is why the strongest men in their 60s rarely talk about what they did in their 30s. They are still doing it, still moving, still showing up, still training, quietly. Because discipline that lasts decades is built for life, not for display. Quiet training is not about the body alone. It is about availability. A man who trains quietly is preparing for moments he cannot predict, not competitions, not photos, but responsibility. He is preparing for long work days that don't wait for energy, for family problems that don't care how tired he is, for years when people lean on him without asking if he's ready. Quiet training keeps a man present, not impressive. Present enough to show up again tomorrow. Present enough to stay calm under pressure. Present enough to carry weight without transferring it to others. This is where discipline becomes protection. A man who collapses under stress does not fail loudly. He fails slowly. He becomes irritable, absent, reactive, and those closest to him feel it first. Quiet training reduces that erosion. As it stabilizes the nervous system, it builds tolerance for discomfort without anger. It teaches the body to release tension instead of storing it. Over time, this changes how a man moves through life. He listens more before responding. He breathes before reacting. He pauses instead of exploding. None of this looks like strength from the outside, but it is. Because families don't need men who peak. They need men who remain calm, remain capable, remain emotionally available. Quiet training also reshapes identity. A man stops seeing himself as someone who must constantly prove value. He becomes someone who quietly embodies it. He no longer asks, "Am I strong enough?" He asks, "Am I stable enough to be depended on?" That question changes how he trains, how he rests, how he lives. And slowly, without announcement, a quiet discipline turns into quiet leadership. The men who last the longest are rarely noticed in the moment. They don't look extreme. They don't speak in slogans. They don't demand recognition. They simply keep showing up. Quiet training teaches a man to separate what feels good from what actually lasts. It teaches him that comfort is loud, but stability is silent. Over time, this silence becomes familiar, not empty, but grounded. A man who trains quietly stops measuring himself against others. He measures himself against time. Can I still move next year? Can I still carry responsibility in 10 years? Can I still be present when it matters most? These questions don't need answers today. They need habits, and habits don't need witnesses. Quiet discipline does not promise admiration. It promises continuity. It doesn't make you impressive. It keeps you intact. And that is what families rely on, what work depends on, what life eventually demands. So if your training feels unnoticed, if your effort feels invisible, if no one seems to care, that is not a problem. That is the environment where endurance is built. Because the men who last the longest are not preparing to be seen. They are preparing to still be standing when everything loud has faded.